This is Jarrod Horak for the runawayhorse.com, and this is my weekly Kentucky Derby 2020 video report. Now this is going to be the Santa Anita Derby recap edition. I'm going to recap the Santa Anita Derby. Obviously, I'm going to look at my hot prospects for the Kentucky Derby. I'm going to look at a horse the horse to watch on my Kentucky Derby list, and talk about some Kentucky Derby news. But let's just start right with the Santa Anita Derby. I was pleased with the outcome. If you watched my Santa Anita Derby preview video last week, you know that I was a big fan of Honor AP. I've actually been a big fan of Honor AP for quite some time. He's been my #1 Kentucky Derby contender for several months now, and I've just been waiting for him to get into longer races where he could really stretch out, reach out with that long stride of his and really get going. He has an outstanding pedigree. They paid a ton of money for him. John Sheriff's a patient trainer, so you knew that when as you got later into the year and when the Kentucky Derby was moved from the first Saturday in May to the first Saturday in September, a horse like Honor AP would be a major beneficiary. And then Santa Anita Derby was moved from April to June, and no problem with that either. Now the favorite in the Santa Anita Derby was Authentic. He had wired the field in all of his races. He just showed good speed. He was able to get out there and control the pace. But I figured my main thinking was, longer distance, Honor AP was going to continue to develop, and his long stride would start to take over a horse like Authentic as you got into distances such as 1 1/8 miles, 1 1/4, and so forth. So that's what happened in the Santa Anita Derby. But I will say Authentic didn't have the best start. He had the outside post, he broke outward, and he wasn't able to get out there and control the pace. But as we saw in his earlier races, as we said, he was able to get out there and control the pace. When a horse doesn't really offer a lot of value and they're not able to sit that perfect trip, you kind of get a feeling you see what they're really made of. And in this race, Authentic ran a decent race. He was tracking the pace, he was up on the pace. But when the real running began in the stretch, Honor AP just reached out. He had more stamina. He was getting stronger as the race went on, and he was able to easily get the best and turn the tables on Authentic in this race. And Honor AP galloped out well, so that bodes well for his chances at 1 1/4 miles. He's won, as I said, with that outstanding pedigree, nice connections. He's got more than enough Derby points now. He picked up 100 points in this race. So now they can decide what they want to do. Do they want to run him 2 more times before the Derby? Do they want to run him 1 more time? So they have options. They could ship across country, or they could stay in California and run in a race like the Los Alamitos Derby, or maybe the Shared Belief Stakes. I think I would, as a fan of his and knowing how he does well in these longer races, you would think they would probably want to keep him at 1 1/8 miles and maybe even 1 1/4 miles, a race like the Travers down the road when they get a new date for that race. But the top 2 ran well. I'm just not sure Authentic, unless he can get that perfect trip where he can control the pace, wants to go much further. Now, Honor AP earned his best career speed figure here, which is another good sign. So he's a developing 3-year-old. And Authentic, in these longer races, he's going to have to get out there and control the pace, or he's not going to be able to outkick a horse with more stamina. That was really the whole story of this race. Honor AP just had more stamina than Authentic. Rushy finished a solid enough 3rd, and then a New Door weakened to finish 4th. He was up on the pace. Shooter Shoot was able to get out there early, but he couldn't keep going. And then you had Maiden, Friars Road, and then Azul Coast, Bob Baffert's other trainee. After Authentic, Azul Coast never got involved, and neither did Friars Road. So that was the story of the Santa Anita Derby. Now, if you look at my Kentucky Derby 2020 blogs, and if you go to the runawayhorse.com, you can look on my Kentucky Derby 2020 page. I'll actually provide the link in this video. If you want to click on that page, it'll take you right to that page, the link in the description in this video. And you can see my Kentucky Derby 2020 blogs. I have been writing those blogs since last September, and so I've been covering the Derby for quite some time now. And one of the sections that I have added, a new section, hot prospects, horses that haven't really run in stakes races yet, and they're ready to jump onto the scene. And my hot prospect this week, Cezanne for trainer Bob Baffert on the Santa Anita Derby undercard. He looked good breaking his maiden in his career debut. They paid more than $3.6 million for him. He's a son of Curlin. Bernardini's the dam sire. So his sprint debut, he figured to to be well meant, because Bob Baffert's always good with first timers, but he figured to really improve around 2 turns, and that's what's probably going to happen in the future. He was tracking the pace. He wasn't quick enough to get the early lead, but he was up on the pace under Flavien Prat, and he was able to just do well in the stretch and pull clear and win nicely. Earned a solid enough speed figure, but he figures as he gets around 2 turns and gets more experience, he should get faster. So Cezanne for Bob Baffert, certainly one to watch on the road to the Kentucky Derby. Now, in other Kentucky Derby 2020 news, we keep getting these injuries and these horses getting knocked off the trail, and not just any horses, they've been the top contenders. First, a few weeks ago, as you saw in one of my Derby reports, Nadal for trainer Bob Baffert. He was undefeated. He was going to probably be the Belmont Stakes favorite. He was injured and subsequently retired. And then Charlatan for Bob Baffert, another undefeated Bob Baffert trainee. He was going to be the favorite for the Belmont Stakes, but then he was injured, and now he's going to the sidelines. Now he's not retired like Nadal, but Charlatan is out most likely of the Kentucky Derby. And then Maxfield was one that such a highly regarded 2-year-old came back and looked so good in the Matt Winn Stakes. Then he gets to his first workout after the Matt Winn, as he's preparing to either run in the Belmont Stakes or the Bluegrass Stakes, which they later on said we were going to point to the Bluegrass Stakes. But then his first workout back, he was injured, and now he's out of all those races too. So he's injured, he's on the sidelines. And then another highly regarded 3-year-old, Wells Bayou for trainer Brad Cox. He had done well earlier this year out there setting the pace in some of these point races and running well in races like the Louisiana Derby. He has bone bruising, and now he's out indefinitely. So we've seen all these top contenders just go by the wayside now. And so now that bodes well for a horse like Cezanne, who could be a late bloomer and get in there. But we're seeing all the top contenders really drop like flies recently. It's a bit disappointing. Now, the updated Kentucky Derby points race schedule, the next points race is going to be the Belmont Stakes on June 20th, and I'll give the possible field for that in a minute. The Ohio Derby on June 27th, the Los Alamitos Derby on July 4th. 4 days later, on July 8th, we have the Indiana Derby. The Bluegrass Stakes from Keeneland is on July 11th. The Haskell Stakes a week later on July 18th. The Shared Belief Stakes at Del Mar on August 1st. The Ellis Park Derby on August 9th. And then the Pegasus Stakes from Monmouth Park on August 15th. Now, we still don't see the Saratoga races. There'll be some points races from Saratoga, like the Travers Stakes. Once they actually release the Saratoga Summer Stakes schedule, those points races will be folded in to that schedule right there. So those are the points races. And now the Belmont Stakes, I mentioned that, is coming up on June 20th. And the probable field right now, after all those defections that I just mentioned, Basin for trainer Steve Asmussen could end up going here. Now, the Belmont Stakes this year is 1 mile and an eighth around 1 turn. So a horse like Basin, who was good around 1 turn as a 2-year-old, and he's done okay around 2 turns, he just hasn't had the stamina, maybe a 1-turn mile and an eighth race could suit him. Dr. Post for trainer Todd Pletcher. He's an up-and-coming sort. He ran well in Florida at Gulfstream Park in his last couple starts, won a minor stakes race there. Seems to be training well. He's lightly racing on the improve. Farmington Road, Pletcher's other Belmont Stakes probable. He hasn't won these big stakes races, but he's been able to sit back and pick up a piece of the purse. Now, in a race like the Belmont, I can see him sitting back, making a run, and maybe hitting the board. Now, Max Player for trainer Linda Rice, he's highly regarded on my Kentucky Derby list. I've had him on there for quite some time. He won the Withers Stakes earlier this year at 1 mile and an eighth. He hasn't run since then. They wanted to run him in the Wood Memorial, but that race was scrapped because of the coronavirus pandemic when Aqueduct closed. And since then, they've wanted to run him in the Belmont Stakes. But it's been a while since we've seen him. But he's one that should continue to get better this year. He seems to have a lot of stamina. Modernist for trainer Bill Mott. After they moved the Kentucky Derby from May to September, Bill Mott took his time with Modernist, let him grow up, and he was ready to bring him back later this year. And now Modernist as a possibility for the Belmont Stakes. We'll see if he's developed. Sol Volante for trainer Pat Biancone. Now, earlier this week, this late runner looked good at Gulfstream Park, winning an optional claiming race. He beat Ete Indian, his stablemate, amongst some other horses. He looked good from off the pace, and he's one that always has that late kick. He's so consistent. He always tries, and a race like the Belmont, he's got that current form going. He could turn back quickly after that victory just the other day at Gulfstream Park. Tiz the Law is probably going to be your heavy favorite. He was a good 2-year-old. He won the Champagne Stakes at Belmont Park. And then as a 3-year-old, he was so good in back-to-back stakes wins at Gulfstream Park over the winter, including the Florida Derby at 1 mile and an eighth. So he's got that tactical speed. We know he likes Belmont Park. He's got the class. He's the logical favorite for the Belmont Stakes. And then Tap It to Win for trainer Mark Casse. And he's one that's gotten really good this year. He was highly regarded as early as a 2-year-old, disappointed in some stakes races, and then he's come back and he's done well in back-to-back victories. And then a possibility for the Belmont Stakes Pneumatic for trainer Steve Asmussen. He's another one that has some tactical speed. So Pneumatic could be one for Steve Asmussen that could show up in the Belmont Stakes. Now I mentioned the horses that I profile. One of my horses on my list each week in these videos. Didn't do one last week because I was handicapping the Santa Anita Derby, but this week back to profiling one of my top 11 contenders, and Tap It to Win is the one that I'm going to profile. Speightstown the sire, Quiet American the dam sire. I had him ranked 15th on my list last time, and now he's actually at number 11, back on my list for trainer Mark Casse. Live Oak Plantations, the owner for this one. Now, he was part of my original Kentucky Derby list when I started it last September. But then I dropped him off my list after he ran poorly in the Breeders' Futurity and the Street Scent Stakes. But he came back this year, optional claiming race at Gulfstream Park on May 9th. He won that one, and then he was even more impressive in an allowance race at Gulfstream on June 4th, earning a strong speed figure. So he just ran June 4th, but they're going to wheel him back quickly in the Belmont Stakes on June 20th. He seems to be the now horse for the Belmont. He's improving. He's got a nice pedigree, good connections. Mark Casse's done well in races like last year. He settled the winner of the Preakness Stakes and the Belmont Stakes. So Tap It to Win seems to be finally developing, looking like the horse that we thought he might be earlier in his 2-year-old season, but now he's starting to put it together. Let's see if he can jump into the stakes ranks and do well in a race like the Belmont. He's an interesting prospect, at least in that race. So if you want to read my Kentucky Derby reports, look in the description in this video. I have the link provided for those written reports. I just updated my Kentucky Derby list, and you can read that list and also my Kentucky Oaks 2020 blog. I also updated that at therunawayhorse.com on my Kentucky Derby 2020 page. Now, if you're interested in my full card analysis, I sell full cards from Santa Anita Park each and every week. Next week, the Belmont Stakes full card. So in addition to my Santa Anita full cards next week, I'm going to do the Belmont Stakes Day full card from Belmont Park on Saturday, June 20th. And you can, again, the description in this video will have that information, and you can read all of my blogs. As I said, free picks from stakes picks from Belmont Park, from Southern California or Northern California on my California page, my New York page. All those links are going to be provided in the description in this video. Now, next week I'll be back, and I'm going to be previewing the Belmont Stakes and giving out my top selection for the 2020 Belmont. Until then, good luck at the races.